The Justice Department announced they are reinstating the controversial practice of asset forfeiture Wednesday. Critics say it allows law enforcement to seize a suspect's possessions without a criminal conviction. But the department is defending the move, saying that they'll put in safeguards to ensure that there is sufficient evidence of criminal activity. CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reid is in Washington. So, Paula, what is this new Justice Department policy and how is it different from the Obama administration's approach?
Elaine, as you noted, asset forfeitures when law enforcement can seize money, cars, houses, anything they believe that it was achieved in connection with a crime. But even if it turns out that the owner didn't actually commit any kind of criminal activity, the government can still seize your property, and there's a possibility you'll never get it back. Now, many states have curtailed this practice, requiring there to be some sort of indictment or some sort of charge before the government can seize your property, but it remains legal at the federal level. In fact, it's quite prolific among federal law enforcement. They use it a lot as a law enforcement tool. So there were many states that would have the federal government adopt their case. Therefore, they could take advantage of the federal law, and all they had to do was share the profits a little bit with the Justice Department, but that local law enforcement agency could still get up to 80% of the value of whatever they seized. The Obama Justice Department, they said that that could no longer take place. That policy, it's called adoption. No more can states where this practice is banned, no longer can they sort of ride the coattails of the federal government. Going forward, though, Jeff Sessions had said that once again, states, even where this practice has been banned, they will be allowed to have the feds adopt their cases and continue to seize assets, even where there's been no charges.
Well, how will this new policy protect against abuses like those we've seen in the past?
Elaine, we had a briefing this morning with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and he talked a little bit about the new protections they're putting in place. He says there will be more oversight, more training of those involved in the seizing of these assets, and he also noted that any asset forfeiture of something that's valued below $10,000 will automatically trigger review by a federal prosecutor. That's significant because a lot of the abuses of non-criminals tend to be sort of smaller amounts. People who get pulled over for a traffic stop lose a large portion of their savings or something very valuable to them and are never found to be the victim of a crime. But there's still a problem. Justice Clarence Thomas recently noted this in a Supreme Court decision, that oftentimes the victims of asset forfeiture are those who can't really afford any sort of advocacy or anyone to help them get their possessions back. So it's not clear that these safeguards will completely eliminate abuses.
Well, why is the Justice Department doing this now, Paula?
Well, Rosenstein told us that he believes this is an important tool for law enforcement. He used the phrase that he wanted to empower law enforcement officials. And I don't think anyone's disputing the fact that we don't want drug dealers to get tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that they've in ill-gotten gains back to put back into their criminal organization. The concern seems to be on people who have never been charged with a crime. How do they get their belongings back? Rosenstein believes that most asset forfeiture is done in good faith, and he believes that these protections will continue to hopefully prevent that. But Elaine, one thing that was very interesting is that we really pressed him on why the federal government is reinstating this policy when half the states have said we don't want our citizens subject to this. And he kept coming back to the opioid crisis. He kept saying, well, in the wake of obviously this unprecedented opioid crisis, that this is an important tool. He said, for example, if you seize and retain $100,000 from a drug dealer, you can't trace that to a particular life that is saved. But he said everything they do will have a significant impact on reducing crime. He said we can incarcerate drug dealers and take the profit out to help reduce the opioid crisis. So it's very interesting because there does not appear to be any empirical evidence that ties asset forfeiture to opioids.
Right. Yeah, that is an interesting argument. Well, there still appears to be some resistance to the move. Can you elaborate on the concerns being raised?
Yes, several Republicans today, Daryl Issa, Mike Lee, several people came out and criticized this. They said, look, even with the safeguards in place, this is still a practice that is rife with abuses. And many of the local law enforcement agencies that depend on this money, Elaine, they were the only ones really today who came out in support of this. The Koch brothers, the ACLU, many agencies on a variety of political spectrums came out and opposed this action today. There has consistently been broad bipartisan support for reforming this practice. So to come out and once again allow this policy of adoption, Jeff Sessions, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, it's pretty much them and the local law enforcement who stand to profit.
All right. Well, jumping topics for a second, Paula, the Supreme Court is temporarily allowing President Trump's administration to limit the entry of refugees into the country, but upheld a lower court exemption for grandparents and other relatives in its travel ban. How significant is that?
was an incremental step. As you remember, when the travel ban was allowed to be enforced following the Supreme Court's decision to hear the case in the fall, they said that you can enforce the travel ban, but you can't enforce it against anyone who has a bona fide relationship to the United States. That included education or employment or close family relationships. And Elaine, anyone like me right now planning a wedding, you know, close family relationship is a very subjective term. And the Trump administration came out with their definition, but they left out a lot of people, nephews, nieces, and grandparents. And that was the next phase of litigation. And what the Supreme Court here said, they said, look, let grandma and grandpa in. The travel ban should not be directed at them. But there was a win for the Trump administration here because the Supreme Court would not allow portions of the travel ban that apply to refugees to be overturned. They're still waiting for some lower courts to come through with a decision on that.
All right, Paula Reid in Washington for us. Paula, thanks so much.